Welcome to the Enneagram 2.0 podcast. I'm Beatrice Chestnut.
And I'm Uranio Paes.
And today we're talking about the Enneagram types and time, and the experience of time and time management.
And this is the second part of 3 parts. We'll talk about body types and time.
Exactly.
So if you haven't listened or watched the previous podcast, that was about head types and time.
The first in this series is about head types and time. Today we'll talk about body types and time, but we do a bit of introduction in that other one. So do listen to that one before you listen to this one.
Right, yes. So I think we should start saying that body types are a little better in grasping time as something that they can manage than the other 2 triads. I think it's a bit more natural for them, and they tend to be a bit more concrete than the other 6 types.
Mm-hmm.
And time is something that they tend to be a bit more comfortable with in general. There are always exceptions, but in general, it's easier for them to deal well with the concept of time and adapting to it and following the limitations of time than for other types. Do you agree? Would you agree with that?
I do agree. And I think it's interesting that the body of the 3 centers, the body is the one that is more in touch with what's going on in the here and now.
Yeah.
And I know, for instance, Gestalt therapy, the Gestalt approach to psychotherapy, the whole thing is built around the body and being aware of what's happening in the here and now, right? That's the whole approach to becoming more aware through that method.
And I think that being a body type includes being a little bit more prone to routines, to following a certain order of things, and having things happen in a certain way. So I think that managing time and even being okay with time being a big factor in everything is natural.
Yeah, it's like the body types naturally kind of deal with it a little more realistically. We talked last time about the head types, about how head types can be very unrealistic when it comes to time, because in a way they're thinking about time in the abstract, almost like theorizing or conceptualizing time, as opposed to more being in time, where the body types are a little bit more in that being in time. I mean, not always in the higher level of being, it more like a being in the level of like experiencing, sensing, being in the body.
Right.
And like you say, having routines, being more oriented toward experiencing and doing than thinking or feeling.
Right, yes. And having said that, I think when self-preservation instinct is low, very low, for a body type, that gets a little confusing, a little mixed experiences with time, because there is this whole need for structure from being a body type, and then I go against having structure as a self-pres repressed person.
Right.
So it's
and
paradoxical.
Conversely, a self-preservation dominant person may also be a little oriented toward being a little more realistic or in touch with time, how long things will take. Like, I think you're self-preservation repressed, I'm self-preservation dominant.
Yeah.
I think we can both agree that I'm, of the 2 of us, much more realistic about how long things will take. Sometimes I can be a little bit optimistic, but usually I'm not way off like you are.
Correct. Yes. And I think...
Thanks for owning that.
And well, I'm not sure I like being realistic. So
yeah, exactly. You don't see it as a good thing.
That's ego.
That's another value judgment on.
Yeah. Now, self-pres dominant body types, 8s, 9s, or 1s, will be too much attached to the concept of time and perhaps being too much controlled by time. I think. And I think the quintessential type that is about following what time is telling me that needs to be done is self-preservation 1, in my view. But also a self-pres 9, a self-pres 8. These are people who will tend to be really realistic about time and having a big need for routines and following a certain order of factors. Just saying, it's still in this introduction about body types and time.
Right. Right, exactly. And I do want to say that if you're listening to this and you're a body type who's self-preservation dominant and you're not relating to it in some ways in terms of being routine oriented, when I see that happen, it's often about trauma, right? Like I know a self-preservation 9 who says, "Oh, I don't like routines." Well, it turned out she had a very harsh type 8 mother who controlled her a lot and tried to impose routines on her. And she resisted for that reason, right? So, when we're saying these things that are generally true for types, and for some reason it doesn't fit for you, just explore if there may be something in your history that is the reason for that. And of course, we're not saying this works for 100% of people, but it's generally true, I think, what you're saying.
Yes, correct. And we'll talk about how that plays out for each of the 3 body types.
Right. So shall we start with type 8?
Yeah, let's start with 8s. So one first thing I want to say, I think it's for all 8s, but more for sexual 8s, or if sexual is a strong second in the instinctual sequence, there is this tendency of, I won't follow your agenda, but I will follow my own, and I want you to follow my agenda, right? My way, and I'll even break away from the current routine and with the rules as they are, and I'll establish new ones. And perhaps later on the path, I'll break the rules again just to show that I keep in charge.
This is self-preservation 8.
Self-pres, maybe even more the sexual as being showing that I'm here in power, right? So
I set the tone. I decide how long things take or what we're doing and what we're doing next,
and I break
how
rules.
Things happen, and I establish my own rules, but also break whatever rules are there, including my own.
Right. So my main point here is, it's easy for me to follow the structure that I decide.
As an 8.
As an 8 in general. Not all 8s. I'd say if sexual is repressed, it's a little less, especially also if it's social first, and self-pressed second, and sexual repressed. But in general, it's like this. I will completely follow the routines that I adopt, and I won't follow as much the ones that people want me to do or impose onto me.
So I thought we were talking about self-preservation dominant, but then you said sexual dominant. So can you clarify what you're saying about the subtypes here in talking about type 8?
So I think I'm saying that for 8s in general, there is this tendency to want to control everything with time and routines.
Right.
If it comes from me,
it's part of how they
you.
impose their power and control over things.
Right, and it's even more so if it's for sexual 8s. It's my way, not your way, and I'll change my way to show that I keep being in charge. And then the idea of doing your way is terrible, right? So I don't want the routine that you set. I want the routines that I set, and you follow my routines. It's a little bit more the sexual 8 in my view. Perhaps a little bit the self-press also, but not as much the social. The thing here is the concept of time. When it's my time, you need to follow, but I won't follow yours. It's like, it's for now. You need to do it because I'm saying it's
one
for
of
now.
The ways they impose their agenda, their truth, their authority. I see. So time is one way of communicating their strength or their authority or their control.
Yeah, and there is a lot of impatience, as we know, for all 8s. And it's about, you follow my time, you follow my pace.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for other people, because to cope with type 8 space, it's not easy. A lot of energy, a lot of expansion of energy because of lust. Lust being the passion of type 8. It's really about having a lot of energy, right? And doing more and more, and the more I do, the more I want to do, and I don't feel tired. So it's always for now, and never for late. And we need to use time and just go do. Don't wait. Very, very fast. Always urgent. But you don't try to do that with me, to impose your own pace onto me.
Mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
Do you think
mm-hmm.
it's like this for eights?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like eights both set their pace of what's happening, and because they tend to be very action oriented, it's, ready, fire, aim. They're very much pushing things to happen right now. That there's a big element of time to that. And I know that when I've worked with, say, teams and leaders and organizations, I often hear eights, for instance, complaining about nines, right? And that they take forever to make a decision, or sevens when they're coming up with all these different ideas, and the eight wants to go. The eight wants to say, okay, let's decide and let's make it happen.
Right.
And I do think there's a big time element to that, and something that may not get surfaced and talked about all the time in relationships with eights and in work settings and life. That the eight is, in a way, controlling what's happening through, like you say, setting the pace, making things happen, forcing action in some ways, or expressing impatience if it's not happening fast enough. Now, I know we also talked in the last podcast a little bit about general orientation to time, and it was my sense that eights are a little bit more present time oriented or immediate time oriented. We're talking a little bit more about the personality level, although we're also talking a little bit about what each type can do to grow. And so we don't mean to say that some types are present in that good sense of being present in the here and now. We're talking about ways of relating to time that aren't necessarily about being present, but more about the personality's view of what needs to happen or how they use or relate to time. And I think with eights, they are pretty much about the immediate time period. But like you said, I think they can also be a little bit looking ahead in the future, because I think eights are big picture thinkers, but they also are often thinking very easily about, okay, how do we move this forward? How do we meet this challenge? How do we make it happen?
Correct. I think the moving forward thing is more a resistance to looking to the past. And it's like,
or maybe looking inside
and see problems. Don't come with obstacles to me. I cannot stop my doing. And we need to be positive. I think eights in general are very positive in terms of making or of believing that things can happen. Not positive in terms of agreeing with you.
Right, or looking at only the positive data.
No,
I think they can look at all the data that's necessary, but you're right in terms of thinking we can do this.
And being self-confident also, and moving forward and say we can make it. Right. So anything that is a question or a consideration about the past, eights are not very patient to hear about. But back to the theme of patience, I'd say that time is counted in seconds and in up to 10 seconds for eights. And this is something that happens for eights and threes only, in my view. Although top executives can also have that regardless of type, but for eights and threes, if you're a coach, if you are someone working for them, you need to know that you have 5 seconds to deliver the main message, and if you don't, they will be mad at you. You don't waste their time. And it's not 1 minute, it's 5 seconds. So before you start talking with an eight, you need to know what you're going to say within the first 5 seconds.
Exactly. And you need to put the most important information up front, not after a long period of talking about other things. And this applies to emails as well, right? Like, don't say a lot in your email and then put the most important thing at the end. Right. And this is, I would say, also a little bit like what happens with threes. Threes and eights are sort of similar in this. Like, give me the bullet points, give it to me up front. Don't beat around the bush, just say the important thing, and don't waste my time. And that's a big element of it.
This is one of the types that hates having their time wasted by others. And people who are slow, or who talk too much, or who go into too many details, or who
say things that aren't important.
Questions.
Beat around the bush, as we say.
Right. So the concept of time is, I need to do more with my time and move ahead fast. So I think that this distorts the concept of time for eights. They tend to see an hour as as being a time frame in which I can do too much.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get stressed and irritated or even tired without noticing.
Yeah.
It's not easy for eights to know. They deny even tiredness.
Mm-hmm.
And they think that an hour is an amount of time that is very big and we can do a lot, while maybe it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they are not as realistic as we might think. They think that time is something that they can do a lot, especially when you're doing with someone else. It's not doable.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do as much as you're saying.
Right. Maybe a little overconfident in general, and when it comes to time.
Yeah,
right?
And then the eight starts thinking that the others know what they need to do. Just they don't know.
Right.
It's clear for the eight, but not for the
Right.
others.
Maybe they don't leave enough time to coordinate or hear from other people. They just want to go into action based on what they think needs to be done.
Right.
Now, can you give some time management tips for eights? Can you kind of help some eights see how they may approach time in a way that's not as good as it could be, and maybe give them some tips?
So eights many times do not plan, and they go do straight on. And what happens is that they do one thing one way, it doesn't work. Then they do it a second way, doesn't work. The third way doesn't work. Then a fourth time it works.
Yes.
And then they say, I'm still fast because I started doing earlier, right? But then sometimes some people achieve results faster because they planned well. Right. So there is this illusion for body types, but especially for eights, that if they keep trying, keep doing, they will get the right thing. But why not planning? Why not using the head a little more
instead of having to experience how something doesn't work and then start over again? But you're right, that in the eight mind, because they're sort of moving forward at a rapid pace and seeing sort of the road ahead, they may not realize how they waste time in taking too much action, or taking action before maybe the time is right. We sometimes say that some head types can take too long to go into action because they're thinking or gathering information. And it's a little bit the opposite for eights. They can go into action, but because they haven't planned, as you said, they waste time doing something that doesn't work. And we often say, it's the ready, aim, fire, ready, something, whatever that might be. It's like if eights can slow down a little bit at the beginning and slow their roll and think through it a little bit like 8 going to 5 in a positive way, to using the airline to 5
from the belly to the head, using the head center a little, and then going to the belly.
A little more strategizing about how to use your time, a little bit more thinking through what's the best plan of action. And again, eights sometimes don't like to hear that, but it can be it can help them be more efficient and use time better if they are willing to kind of slow down a little bit and slow down to go faster in the bigger picture.
And if you're an eight, just question, is it really true that whatever you're doing, it's better to do it now? Sometimes it isn't. Like sending an email when you're irritated. Or if you need to engage more people before going ahead. So no, sometimes it's better to wait a little. Right? So developing patience has a lot to do with going to the head or the heart. Like I will listen to people, or I'll plan.
And listening to people, maybe getting aligned, and align. If everyone's working in the same direction and has the same vision and knows what's happening, things can go much better. And again, sometimes the eight will sort of see things the way they want to see it and think that their view is the objective view, and really they're seeing it their way. And they may, if they slow down a little bit and take in more information, they can see the broader view and chart the path forward with in a better way. Use their time better.
Yes. One other thing about eights that I want to say, I think that when it comes to time management, eights grow more towards who they really are in essence when they stop trying to fit in too many things in their day, and doing a little less, and having more spare time, and just, cooling down, and just being passive, or like more like contemplative of things happening. So less things within a day. I think eight sometimes get feel too proud of doing much more than other people and making things happen. And I can see that that's good from a certain perspective, but it's not good for eights in a self-development perspective.
Right. And also, leaving more time can also mean getting more in touch with themselves, right? Maybe looking more inside, seeing what's going on, even like tapping into how they're really feeling about something in a way they may not want to look at.
Right.
They don't want to see what's vulnerable about what's happening.
Yeah.
That can be really good for an 8 on a growth path, to leave more quiet time, both to connect with others, but also to connect with themselves.
Yeah, recently in a course, helping an 8 improve his intimate relationship.
Yes.
Was we just did one simple thing, which is when you get back home from office, before you get into your house, if you breathe 3 times,
Yes, consciously.
Leave the stress of work behind.
Yes.
And then how would your communication with your partner change?
Yeah.
Right. And it was a beautiful piece of
Yeah,
work.
it changed
very
it a
capable
lot.
aide.
Just that suggestion that he slow down and breathe, and
Mhm.
not just take that work momentum into the home and seeing what was wrong when he got home, and not going inside himself, and then from that place deeper inside himself connecting with his partner.
Yeah. And I'd say slow down your breath, breathe slower, and also eat more slowly, or speak slowly, or do whatever is needed, or lower down your tone of voice, or your voice volume.
And that's good for many types, but 8's included.
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about 9's.
Yeah, I think 9's, we can say, they used to have lots of time management problems. Many 9's.
What do you mean they used to?
I think it's more common for 9's to have time management problems than or other types.
Right. And I think what the nature of those time management problems might be something like procrastination,
being interrupted by others, and
getting
without saying no,
getting distracted easily, and maybe doing more inessential tasks and not focusing on the main, most important priority.
Exactly. Many things account for the problem that 9's end up having with time.
It's interesting. I once saw someone doing a presentation at a conference on the Enneagram, and one of the things he was saying about 9's and time is that 9's tend to think in terms of a really long time horizon. Like if you ask a 9 how long they're going to live, they say a really long time, and I think there is that sense of, it's almost like we were just talking about 8's and how they need to slow down. It's almost like 9's are, because they tend to have a slower pace. It's like almost like time is stretched out, and they think, we have plenty of time. And so in a way, they may not use time well because their pace is slower, and they may, rightly or wrongly, and many times wrongly, think they have plenty of time, when it might help them to focus more on, speeding up or using their time more efficiently or in a more focused way.
Right. Even in how they communicate, we sometimes say that it's the saga style.
They tell a long story
from the very beginning. You'd better not interrupt, because the 9 person will start it all over again
from the beginning.
Right? Yeah. So it's really telling things or seeing things in this big process, and finding it hard to make it short.
Yeah.
But sometimes also 9's speak too little. It's either too much or too little.
Right.
But this is not as
Right,
much
right,
about
right.
communication. It's
Right.
about time.
And I also think it's about, also takes them a long time often to make a decision.
Yeah.
Or, and I always think sometimes when you ask a 9 a question, you can almost see energetically how they hear it in their head and then they have to go down into their body and all the way down and maybe
swallow
it. It hangs out there a bit and then it comes back up and out. So it may take them a long time to know what they want or think about what their answer is or make a decision. Sometimes they can get stuck sitting on the fence or not knowing. And so I think the issue of time with 9s can be sort of the opposite of, say, an 8 or a 3 who's more impatient and moving things forward. Can be like taking a lot of time and sometimes maybe too much time to do something or to focus on the right thing.
Right. Yeah. And I want to talk about time pressure for 9s.
Good idea.
I think that whenever someone else presses the 9 against time, like you need to do this fast, it doesn't go well. Tends not to go well because 9s get stubborn, passive aggressive, and they hate being forced and being put under pressure. At the same time, many 9s use pressure themselves to have things done at the last moment. Like I don't start working on this project until it's like a few hours to deliver, and then I start doing, and I'm the most productive person there is. Right. So it's funny to me to see how much 9s avoid other people's pressure of time upon them, but how they use that to themselves in order to do what they haven't done before.
Right. And it also occurs to me that in talking about 9s and time, we're also talking about sloth, the passion of type 9, and right action, the virtue, which is sort of that the heart's knowing of the most important thing and getting into a sense of unstoppable momentum forward, And I think to those two things, there's also an element of time because sloth is often about, in practice, losing awareness and going to sleep to one's own priorities, to one's own agenda, what somebody wants and what the goal is. And so that can, I think, also create this sense of, oh, there's plenty of time, or not really conscious of time, of needing to sort of prioritize myself and what I need and doing something in an immediate way or in an urgent way that's actually practically realistically urgent.
Yeah, one thing that I sometimes suggest 9s do to use time better is to see how way longer they take to do something for themselves as opposed to doing something for other people.
Right.
And then compare and feel a little bit pissed off at that.
Yeah.
And see how this is a measure of how much they prioritize other people more than themselves.
Yes.
Or also how long they take to move things ahead if they are taking the lead of something as opposed to just doing for someone else. So I like to ask 9s to confront these two situations and feel not too good about that, as in I'm making myself less important, and then feel irritated with that, and develop the sense of urgency in order for myself. I want to do something for myself. So I do think that in order to move things ahead faster, it's important for 9s to feel less comfort and to be more irritated with something and stick with that concept of irritation and move things ahead from the energy of anger. So learning also how to channel that
anger
towards action.
Right.
So, and that is doable. We see that happening with 9s many times.
And sometimes if they can do that, they get very energized, right? And I do think it's important for them to discern, almost like take time out, kind of like you were talking about Stephen Covey in the last part of the last podcast about the head types, with really strategizing more consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how am I going to use my time today? And when am I expending more time on things that are for other people, or things I should be saying no to,
Mm-hmm.
things that I don't really want to be doing, or things that aren't really essential, versus when am I spending my time on something that's really the most important thing, especially putting myself in the equation,
Mm-hmm.
and not just, being very active and busy and working really hard on behalf of everybody else, and
Right.
leaving myself for last.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And then learning to say no to what other people ask of you, and not making yourself as available.
Yeah.
That helps a lot. Also, nines
Mm-hmm.
to save time and to stop being so busy with other people's business.
Yes.
And bringing yourself to be a bit more alone, to work, I don't know, a couple of hours per day, for instance, without anyone reaching out to you, without interfering, without you seeing emails or getting calls or whatever. That is super useful, and I see nines becoming way more productive when they do that.
Do you have any time management tips for nines around being more decisive? Because I think that sometimes what holds them up is like not knowing what they want, or not being able to decide on what their priority is, or what they want to take action on for themselves, especially.
I like to ask things like, what is your belly telling you? What does your gut?
What is your body saying?
If you needed to say something now, what is your gut? What would your gut say? Or to even see some body movement that is happening, like, oh, okay. I don't look very positive when I think of this idea, but for the other idea I look more positive. So looking at body signs,
yes,
and being able to say, like, I don't know, and then I sometimes ask, and if you knew, what would be the answer? Right?
Yes, that's what I've sometimes said. If they say I don't know what I want to do, I might say something like, what if you just take a guess? And what do you know, their guess ends up being right on every time. And you know what, I was just thinking about something that I wonder might be good for nines that was the opposite for eights. We talked about how eights sometimes, because they're so action oriented, they may go in a few wrong directions and waste their time by taking action and not getting it right to the third time. Whereas if they had planned better, I wonder if nines, they do need to try on something. When they don't really know what they want, they may need to get a taste of something, and that actually might move them forward overall in a quicker way than if they get stuck and are paralyzed in taking action or procrastinate on things. It might be good for nines to kind of give themselves an experience of one thing they might want, and then once they experience it, like, oh no, this isn't my priority, it might actually be good for nines to kind of try things on.
Yes, I like this idea.
Okay, so what about type 1?
Well, I think ones run a big risk of becoming slaves of time, and slaves of a watch or the calendar, the diary, and they need to be a bit less organized, a bit less predictable, even, or just to allow things to happen as they do, as they happen, and to be instinctive, as they really are. Like, I remember a problem with a leader in a bank, and I worked for her team and did a bit of coaching with her. And she would have a problem of taking a long time to make decisions. But this is because she had to adapt to all those other leaders that wanted her to prove mentally why she wanted to go a certain way. And she felt deep inside really disrespected in her instinctive abilities of just knowing what to do. And I would like to move ahead faster,
have a clear gut sense, without having to explain it to the head types in minute detail.
Exactly. So I think that if ones decide to comply less with other people's expectations, it could be a great idea for them. And in a way, that would help them use time better and not waste time because of what other people might think of them. And of course, the fear of being criticized is big behind that. And I think there is one right way to do things. And in practice, all the educational system, almost everywhere, has always told us that the right thing is to be what? Mental. Right. But you, as a type 1, you are not mental, and you can do things right a bit more quickly without having to prove or do so,
or criticize yourself.
Exactly. And if you detach a little bit from this fear of being criticized, I think you can move things ahead way faster and using more of your instinctual intelligence.
Right. Letting that flow more.
Yeah. So that is one aspect. Another thing is ones tend to be too detail oriented, at least some ones or most ones, and that doesn't favor doing more things in less time.
Right.
As well as having this this immense drive for quality and thinking that the good is never enough. It needs to be excellent. But sometimes it's better if it's only good, right? Because it will happen faster.
Right.
So,
not perfect.
Yeah. So I think that it goes against the one's own interest and the interest of time if they stick to being that perfectionist. But in general, I see that ones have this paradox. They want to be fast and productive, and they are practical, but at the same time, they want to perfect what's already
perfect
what's already really good.
Right.
So it might create a paradox. So ones can sometimes procrastinate, although they are objective as a style.
Exactly. Because they take too long thinking it's not good enough and trying to make it more and more and more perfect. And sometimes that effort lasts beyond the original deadline.
Right. Yeah. And I think ones can benefit, as I said, from less organization, just allowing the belly to say, now it's that, now more it's this flow. Just get into the flow, and don't come to your mind as in fearing what people will think, that they will judge you, or that you might make a mistake. And allow yourself to make mistakes as an inner work method. And it's good for ones to make mistakes willingly, because then they will work on being less self-critical.
Right.
Yeah. And I think that when it comes to the concept of time, how ones take time, they many times get stressed with what's about to happen. I need to be vigilant. I need to be guarded and pay attention.
Avoid mistakes.
It's on me to see all the errors around, all the mistakes, and correct not only my own, but everybody else's. And I need to be tense, alert.
Right. It's a little bit like sixes who end up thinking being anxious and on the alert all the time is a positive thing, right? For a different reason. For sixes, for ones, it's like, I've got to be on the lookout for mistakes, for doing it wrong. And that ends up, in some ways wasting time, but also wasting effort, right? A lot of energy goes into being tense or being worried or being resentful or whatever the person's feeling that they're sort of holding inside, like a pressure cooker.
Right.
And so I think sometimes both holding in a lot of tension sort of wastes someone's energy. And if you're wasting energy, probably you're also wasting time. But also, the way that tension can leak out can lead to things that aren't very efficient and things that don't go well, because the one isn't maybe allowing time for pleasure, for play, for relaxation, for not being so much on the schedule. What do you think? What are some of your maybe time management tips for ones?
Well, what I think is that it's very hard to dedicate time for something that is not the duty, not what's right, the right thing to do,
the obvious right thing.
And time, for instance, idle time.
Right, goofing. Like I have a joke with my type 1 father. He's a social one. He's retired now, but he's still diligently, on his computer, reading things, doing things all day. And we have a joke that whenever I call him and he answers the phone, I say, "What are you doing? Goofing off?" Right? Because I can't imagine him goofing off. Right? Even his leisure time is spent, saving the wildlife of the United States and things like that.
Right. And I think that allowing oneself to be lazy, to feel lazy for some time, it's uncomfortable in the beginning, but pretty soon the one person starts seeing that that's not bad.
Yes.
That's enjoyable, and they were in need of that. They didn't know, but they were in need of that.
Right.
And then I'd say, looking at your wants, not only your needs, your musts, and what ought to be done right now.
Right. And I like what you said earlier in terms of the concept of pressure or time pressure. I think ones put a lot of pressure on themselves. And again, I think when you're putting pressure on yourself, it's inevitable that you're going to be wasting energy or effort or trying to push things along in ways that create more stress as opposed to maintain more efficiency and flow. And so I think flow is a good word for ones when it comes to time management. Any other things you would say? Any tips for ones?
It's useful for ones to understand that anger and resentment, the two main problems for ones, are bigger according to how much time I dedicate to being in silence and having fun, having idle time, goofing off. What I mean is, the more you allow yourself to have this downtime, the less you'll feel angry and resentful.
I see.
And it's important to understand that as a consequence. So this way, maybe ones can start understanding downtime as an investment in their emotional state, their mental state of resentment, and more. So I hear from ones that for them, when they take vacations, it takes longer than for most people to disconnect, like a few days until I really relax. And that's because of that pattern. And now I really encourage ones to deal with time in a way that you understand the importance of downtime and not doing anything useful, and the importance of just relaxing. Relaxation is essential for ones.
Exercise also. I know many ones who need that exercise time as a way of moving the energy of anger and other things.
I agree with that most of the times, but not always.
That's what I was going to say.
What I see many times is, now I started doing something for me. And 8 out of 10 times what I hear is, I'm going to the gym. Right? So many times
it becomes part of the hard routine.
But but sometimes it's duty still.
Yes.
So I really want to encourage ones to,
or following the rules or being a good example.
I think they need to contemplate having a little bit of useless time. Dedicate time to being useless. Because we also say that for once, the path of growth is getting worse, not better.
Right.
And being like lazy and more plays a role even bigger than doing something super important, of course, is going to the gym and exercising.
Right. Yeah. And I think it goes without saying potentially that it can be hardest for self-preservation ones because they put the most pressure on themselves. And they have a little more anxiety than the other two ones. And so sometimes that anxiety can drive a lot of effort, which ends up not being economical or efficient because what's driving it is more the worry, the anxiety, and that just sort of feeds this vicious circle of sort of being on the hamster wheel and not being able to get off.
Right. Yeah. And one story that I heard a few times from different self-press ones. I have 7 alarm clocks that I set every day so that I don't miss, my time, that I'm always punctual. And I've never needed to use any because I wake up before they go off.
Yes. Yeah.
But I cannot not have them.
Yes.
The tension.
Which can be a wasted energy, really.
Right.
And which, of course, wasted energy can be, connected to time pressure and those kinds of things.
I do think that similarly to what we said for 5s in the other episode, for 1s, it's sometimes useful to just get rid of the watch, clock, and go a bit more with the natural flow of things.
Wow, it sounds hard, but useful.
Yes.
Okay.
And be late at times.
Yeah. That sounds like a good thing for a 1. All right. Well, this was the body types in time or time management. Next time, we'll look at the heart types and time, experience of time management tips. And so we'll look forward to seeing you for that one. That's the 3rd in this 3-part series on time. Join us again next time for the Enneagram 2.0 podcast, where we talk about all things Enneagram.